Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 305 Insights. I'm your host, Alan Somerton. In today's episode, we're going to be revisiting the FSU Alabama game and talking about the concept of buying in. Now, throughout this episode, you're going to hear a lot of generic things. There's going to be a lot of statements that you hear that are kind of like hard hat and lunch pail. They brought their best foot forward. They wanted to win more. You might hear a lot of those types of things today, but the concept we're really going to dive into is how Mike Norvell and company have turned this team around. Now, how did we get here? Last year, Mike Norvell and the former coaching staff, they got talent evaluations correct, but the players didn't buy in. You had legacy players like Marvin Jones Jr., you had Patrick Payton coming back, you brought in DJ Ungulale, you brought in Malik Benson. It was supposed to be a revenge tour, and that lasted for all of one scripted series in the season. We all know how it ended, 2-10. What do you do this offseason? Norvell knows his job is on the line. Even after a 13-0 season that ended as 13-1, then he had a 10-3 season before. You cannot go 2-10 at Florida State. And he went with a safe pick at offensive coordinator and an intriguing pick at defensive coordinator, Gus Malzahn and Tony White. Now, the thing that really caught my eye on the defensive side was, again, not only from the players, but more importantly, from the coach himself, Tony White. The adjustments made after that first series against Alabama where they rushed for 55 yards and drove down the field. James Williams wasn't doing that great at the defensive end side. They were running the ball that way, and he wasn't setting the edge, containing, doing different things like that. And it seemed like they were picking on him. Tony White took him out for a little bit, replaced him with a rotation of edge rushers. And then he also brought the safeties in, played more inside the proverbial 10-yard box. Maybe not that much in, but they were much closer to the line of scrimmage. So Earl, who had an amazing game, that man was launching himself at Alabama players. Almost to a concerning level where I think he needs to be careful at how he attempts to decleat people, because the injuries could start piling up, but it was fun to watch him play this game. All his adjustments made, those tiny micro adjustments. And even then, again, James Williams struggled early, but he was one of a handful of defensive linemen that finished with more than 5 or more, and I think he had 6 pressures on week 1, QB pressures. Don't get me wrong, he needs to finish some of those because he had multiple opportunities to get a sack, but unfortunately he didn't. Either way, the buy-in from these players, the defensive line, the linebackers, the cornerbacks, the safeties. Again, I've already mentioned Earl Little Jr. Ashland Barker had himself a game as well. And you could point out certain instances where he looked really good, but I think one of the important plays of the game happened when I believe it was getting down inside the 5-yard line. Ryan Williams caught a pass, and Barker lit him up on the 2 or 3 yard line. And that set a tone to Ryan Williams that for the rest of the game, he had alligator arms. Now, you could point to Kalen DeBoer and Grubbs, the offensive coordinator for Alabama, putting Ryan Williams in a disadvantage, so to speak, of trying to use him out of the slot in different ways and just allowing him to get lit up across the field. So by the end of the game, he had a concussion. Not sure that was the most effective way to use Ryan Williams as a decoy a lot of times. But the back end of the defense played great. You saw certain individuals play well in spurts. Blake Nicholson played well in spurts. You had one of the Desir twins do great work against Kalen Proctor. Kalen Proctor had a horrible game for Alabama. And whether it was Thompson, Desir, Williams, or any of the other rushers, he did not have the game that you expected of someone of his talent and caliber. But again, this goes to the concept of the buy-in with this team, the max effort that's made every single play, the speed in which that they're playing with. You really saw this buy-in with a few players from last year in Daniel Lyons and Jarrell Jackson Jr. I mean, Darrell Jackson Jr., I believe, played 55 snaps. He's not going to need to do that every single game because ideally Kevin Wynn is going to be back soon, and the coaching staff is high on him. And he will definitely be the nose tackle backup for Darrell Jackson, so you can kind of save the wear and tear on that for the big games. But kudos to Darrell Jackson Jr. for coming in shape and just, man, what an influence he was. And it doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but this is the Darrell Jackson that was hyped up by many pundits last year, by the coaching staff. Odell Higgins thought he could be on another level. Booger McFarland and ESPN thought that this was going to be the best defensive line in the country last year. And he was one of the main reasons why. And you saw how he performed. He performed against a high-level SEC center who was getting rave reviews as arguably the best center in college football. And he had a not that great of a Pro Football Focus grade. And that's because of Darrell Jackson Jr. There's a still shot making its way around social media of, on particular play, Darrell Jackson Jr. was triple teamed. And there's another clip going around of when he was double teamed and he still managed to get his arm free to tackle a running back trying to run up the middle. And Daniel Lyons, night and day difference from last year. Again, this is an individual with a lot of potential in the coaching staff's eyes, and one that they've always said, if you give max effort every single day, every single play, you're going to find yourself in a lot of advantageous situations. And he was also another individual. Again, only 5 power forward defenders recorded 6 or more pressures in week 1. James Williams had 6. Daniel Lyons had 6 from the defensive tackle point of view. And again, it's just an amazing job done by him. Play in and play out. You can just see, and the key is, you knew Daniel Lyons was going to play. You knew Darrell Jackson Jr. was going to be leaned on heavily. And it's more about other players as well. Like we talked about Earl Little Jr., great game. Barker, great game. And how they were trusted by this coaching staff. The key coming into this offseason was making sure that the best fits will play. It's not just about who has the highest rankings, recruiting rankings, who gets the most NIL money, who they thought would be most advantageous for a victory. It's the people who earned it through trusting of the coaching staff by their practicing and execution on the field. Again, we're talking about Ashland Barker. He played 63 snaps, 2 pass breakups, 7 targets, 2 catches allowed, 4 solo tackles, 3 snaps at slot, 21 at linebacker, and 16 at safety. I mean, these guys were all over the place. Daniel Lyons, he had only 20 pressures in total entering 2025. And he had 6 in this game alone. You got monster men like him and Darrell Jackson in the middle. Daniel Jones 6'4", 302 pounds. I believe Darrell Jackson's like 6'6", 350 pounds or 340, something like that. If these guys play to this potential in the middle, which is the key in this 3-3-5 defense, this is going to be a great season for FSU. Considering where the expectations were around basically 7 wins and where they could end up if this is how this team is going to play moving forward. This defense was absolutely incredible to watch. Sure, there's a lot of things you could clean up. Ty Simpson was a second or so late on a lot of his reads. You might not be as lucky moving forward with the likes of Carson Beck, DJ Lagway, and Cade Klubnik in the other big games. Quindarius Jones was seemingly picked on a lot in this game. Will Jabril Rawls be able to crack the starting lineup once he becomes fully healthy? Is there another cornerback that can step up besides having Wilson on one side of the ball? It could be, or he could clean it up. Again, it's game 1 of a 3-3-5 defense. That's what makes it more incredible because of the fact that this was game 1 against a high-level opponent. This was not an FCS team, clearly. This was not a lower end of Power 4 team like a Wake Forest or a Northwestern, something along the lines of that, like an Arizona, I guess, currently, or an Arkansas. This was Alabama, which is, on paper, the first or second most talented team in the country based on 247 composite ratings of all members of their roster. Either number 1 or number 2 to Georgia. The difference in this game was the coaching and execution by the players. The players were put in multiple positions of success, and they executed it more often than not. On the offensive side, 63 plays were ran and only 3 negative plays. And those 3 negative plays only amounted to 11 yards lost, with 8 coming on the one play by Castellanos that was initially ruled a sack and that was taken away because they deemed it a running play by the quarterback. And so it was just a design run that lost yards. So if you take away that initial ruling of a sack, even though, again, it wasn't, the offense averaged 6.1 yards per play, 16.9 yards per completion, and 5 yards per carry. That's, again, the sack that was taken away adjusted. Folks, they ran the ball 49 times. You hear that expression, oh, we see what you are when you first get punched in the mouth. FSU punched Alabama in the mouth and they could not recover. You saw the blocks that Randy Pittman was throwing on these linebackers. You saw, I believe it was Roydell Williams on one of the initial running plays. I think it was the Castellanos run. Blow up number 18 on Alabama, and that guy was seeing ghosts for the rest of the game. Loafing around on plays. He was the one loafing across the field on the Makai Denzi 52-yard run. And, man, this is something that I also wanted to pick up on. I believe I briefly touched on it in the previous podcast, and if I didn't, I'm saying it now. The thing that I enjoy about Gus Malzahn the most is that he puts the ball into his playmakers' hands. And it's not just by passing the ball on a slant or something like that, or handing it off straight up, or doing a bubble screen. The way he got Danzy involved in the game, the way he got Jalen Lucas involved in the game. Again, lining him up on the outside, bringing him back as a running back, and then floating him out, making sure that a linebacker's covering him, and Castellanos just has to dump it off to him for a 60-plus yard gain. The offensive line did not allow a sack. They didn't allow a sack to an Alabama football team with all the talent that they have. There's multiple videos going around of a certain right tackle at Florida State multiple times pancaking and making sure that when he gets up, he's dragging his lower half across the Alabama player. And this was pointed out specifically by, I believe, Trent Richardson, a former Alabama running back, or maybe it was A.J. McCarron, a former Alabama player on a podcast talking about that. But to me, the most important play came with about 9:20 left in the fourth quarter. 4th and 1 from their own, I believe it was 32 or 36 yard line. With all the momentum that it swung in Alabama's favor, Mike Norvell knew deep down that this play was going to define the season. This was the play where he told his team, I have fully bought into the idea of what our identity is and what we can be this season. And the team backed him up on that play. You saw the offensive line get a massive push on that Alabama line. And Roy Dale Williams came barreling through to get that yard. That, to me, showed the potential of what this season could be. And folks, after a 2-10 season, I've rewatched a lot of highlights of this game and rewatched bits and pieces of it. This was an absolute mauling by Florida State. If Jalen Lucas did not muff that punt, and if you look closely, it looks like the ball deflected off of an Alabama player. And that's why Jalen Lucas was surprised it kind of hit him so quickly. But you take away that muff punt, this game would have been an even bigger blowout, in my opinion, because that defense was firing on all cylinders. The offense probably would have eaten up some time, even if it didn't, because I believe the previous one they went 3 and out. Or if not, it was a very short drive. But I believe that offense would have drove down a little, at least gotten a field goal, but for sure would have taken some time, given the defense a little bit more rest, come back more energetic, and it would have been a one-score game in the fourth quarter. 10.7 million viewers watched this game. It peaked at an amazing 12.9 million. It's the most watched Week 1 3:30 game in history. A lot of eyes in America were watching how good FSU looked. And before we wrap this up, again, talking about the whole buy-in thing. You're seeing it, like I said, from the offensive side and from the defensive side. You're seeing how the offensive line, under Herb Hand's tutelage and understanding the Gus Malzahn system, how they were able to push around and control the line of scrimmage. Even though they ran the ball 49 times, you saw how many different people ran the ball. Even Casey Holmes got a touchdown run in there, which was nice to see. On the flip side, you have the Alabama Crimson Tide wondering what's next. There's a lot of rumblings in Tuscaloosa about how the buyout of Kalen DeBoer is going to work. And if I'm not mistaken, it has to be done in installments until the year 2031. So it doesn't seem as tough as, let's say, a buyout of Mark Stoops, where I think he's got like 30 or 35 million, 40 million or something like that needs to be paid out within, I think, 90 days. So it's a massive lump sum amount versus what Alabama can do and kind of stretch out the buyout over a 6-year period. Is Kalen DeBoer a fit? Kalen DeBoer, make no mistake about it, is a good college football coach. He has won every stop that he's been at. But unfortunately, Alabama doesn't have a good coach expectation. They need a great coach. They need a historic coach. And I do want to point out something. It's something that I believe in. It's something that many people in the industry have whispered out loud. But Nick Saban obviously won a lot of national championships. Nick Saban is arguably the greatest head coach in college football history. But there is a correlation between the advent of NIL and him leaving the sport. And you're seeing now with Alabama, with other SEC schools in general, and other leagues and other teams rising up and evening the playing field. The SEC, everybody knows, went on a long string of winning national championships. But now that NIL is around, Big Ten has won 2 straight national championships. Alabama didn't look so hot in the last year of Nick Saban and got gifted a playoff run when FSU got snubbed. Alabama's 5-5 in their last 10 games. Kalen DeBoer has lost 4 games, being a double-digit favorite, or it might be even as high as a 2-touchdown favorite. The expectations versus reality is what's going to crush Alabama, both the football program and the fan base. What Nick Saban did isn't sustainable. Winning a championship basically every recruiting cycle, if not less. That isn't the way college football works anymore. And Nick Saban understood that, which is why he left. Because no longer was it about the brand. No longer was it about buying in and waiting your turn. Because it's very clear that a lot of SEC schools, including Alabama, put it this way, a few cycles ago, by a few I mean about like 8 years ago, there is this 4-star defensive end named Jerez Parks. He was a top 10 defensive end in the country. This is a man who had offered from Clemson, Florida State, Michigan, Georgia, top tier of the top tiers, the Blue Bloods. He gray-shirted to go to Alabama. Now, what does gray-shirting mean? It means he would not enroll as a full-time student to the spring of next semester. This would allow Alabama to not count him against the NCAA-mandated 85 scholarship limit. The NCAA only allows 25 initial counters to join a program on scholarship in any one class. This is where, when there's smoke, there's fire. This kid had dozens of offers to go to other high-level schools, again, like Georgia, Clemson, Florida State, Michigan, and he gray-shirted. How do you think he was okay with that? A top 100 recruit gray-shirted to play at Alabama. And you think that's because, it was only he wanted to play for Nick Saban? When he could have played for Jim Harbaugh? Could have played at Clemson under Dabo Swinney? When they were competing for national championships? Could have played at Ohio State, who's always in the run for national championships? Let's be real, folks. Let's be real. Gotta be honest with each other. With that being said, where does Alabama go from here? They've lost that identity of the physicality of an Alabama defense. The ability to pound the ball on the offensive side while going over the top with game-breaking speed. Right now, there's a lot of talent on that side, but they're not playing as a cohesive unit. That offensive line has a bunch of 4 or 5-star caliber players, but they do not play well as a starting five. You got talented cornerbacks all over the place. There's a lot of people who are going to be playing in the NFL that are on this team, on both sides of the ball. And Florida State made them look like they were the 2-10 team coming off of last year. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about buying in, where the coaching staff and the players are all on the same page. I believe the tight end in Alabama gave an interview sometime. It wasn't directly after the game, but it was maybe a day or two after, talking about how they weren't on the same page with the coaching staff in terms of where the offensive players believe they should be going and where the coaching staff was putting them in. That wasn't happening at Florida State. And it's crazy to think coming into the season, the number 8 team in Alabama, this was going to be where Kalen DeBoer figured it out in year 2. Started off hot after they beat Georgia, their number 1 ranked team in the country. They finished the season 9-3, losing the bowl game to Michigan. They come in here and they're one of the favorites to win the national championship. A lot of pundits were picking them. And now they turn into an overrated team because FSU demolished them in that sort of way. We'll find out. But again, I think the key takeaway from this game is, again, the players and coaching staffs. Which ones bought in and which ones didn't. And that was clearly displayed on the field. That's it for today's episode, folks. We're going to try and get another video out, recap of the Notre Dame game. And then we'll preview some of the big games this weekend. I know FSU's got East Texas A&M and UM's got Bethune-Cookman, so we're going to have to dive into some other games because ideally we're not going to have to worry about those games at all. So, somewhat of a long-winded episode, but again, I just really want to dive into this concept of the players buying in and the coaching staff showing these players that if you buy in and if you trust the system, you will play. And the coaching staff and the players at FSU right now, after 1 week, it looks like they're all bought in. And that's really exciting. You know the drill, folks. Find us on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. Like the videos. Turn those notifications on. Follow us on Apple Podcasts as well. Rate us 5 stars there. Turn those notifications on if you want to follow there. And we're also on Spotify as well. Thanks for listening to this episode, folks. Thanks for stopping by. And we'll catch you next time here on 305 Insights. Have a good one, folks.